Awesome. Well, thank you for making some time, first of all. We don't have quite a lot of people in here yet, but there's been a lot of people watching the replays, and that will live there forever. So that's fun. But essentially, I kind of started this like roundtable sort of format with like other designers because I've realized that like I think collaboration and just like talking to each other about the struggles of what it's actually like running a design business and like how your humanity kind of plays into that is not talked about enough. I know like Abby from Wayfair had that like unfiltered design summit, and it was really kind of inspiring to just like hear other people's stories and their experiences in kind of running a business and kind of take away the polish of what we also always put out on Instagram. Um,
Absolutely.
and like pull the curtain down. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this because I've also just loved following you and seeing your travels and taking the packaging design course. So it was so funny when we had that call when I was actually on that photo shoot. It was kind of like a very like, weirdly serendipitous thing. But yeah, so I hope that we can just kind of like have like a unfiltered conversation about what things have been like for you and hear more about your journey. So I'd love for you to give the audience just like a brief overview of what it was like getting into design as a career, because you had mentioned in passing that you experienced some pretty early rejection from
Yeah,
like
yeah,
career counselors. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what that was like for you?
yeah. So my journey into being a designer has been straightforward in the sense that I've always known I wanted to be a designer. So when I was 15, this is like your equivalent of high school, our comprehensive school, we had to kind of like not choose, but we had to kind of like pick things that we wanted to move forwards with in life. And I was at that point, I was like, right, I'm going to be a designer. I'm going to be a packaging designer. And one of our projects that we did really early on for our GCSEs or our qualifications was a packaging project. And at that point, I thought, this is what I want to do forever. So that was when I was 15. So that's quite unusual. I know people don't often have that kind of like set in stone. But also I think because I'd had that decision made and I was sat on that, it made it really kind of like it had to happen. So I did whatever I had to do to make it happen. And it wasn't always easy. So I studied at uni. I did a graphic design degree. I specialized in packaging naturally because I'd already decided that's what I was going to do. And we didn't have to. There were other options, but I was like, I enjoy the 3D aspect. I enjoy the physicality of packaging. I enjoy how it's more than just logos and colors. It's about how we interact with the consumer, how we're selling a product. I enjoyed at uni we had to like make many things, so it was all kind of like how the tactile nature of packaging comes together as well and how it feels in the hands. So for me, that was the natural thing to do. I stayed an extra year to study more packaging, and then that's when it got difficult because I was then left into or put into the world to get a job, right? And with a packaging specific degree in the world of graphic design, it's very, very, very niche. It's
Very,
like
yeah.
your portfolio is, well, my portfolio was full of like shapes and concepts for like forms, looking at plastics and materials and cardboard. And there are packaging agencies out there, of course, just like Our Kind is a packaging agency, but we don't do that kind of structural aspect. So they were looking at my portfolio saying like, where's the graphic design? Where's the branding? So there was this kind of like, yeah, this struggle between what is packaging and what is branding and where is it in a portfolio. So then I had to do quite a lot of work in building a portfolio that then suited a more commercial brand and packaging outcome versus what I'd learned in uni. So I went through lots of internships, lots of internships to learn the ropes with brand and packaging versus just packaging, the stuff that I'd formula at uni. Yeah, and it took me a long, long time to get a job. At the same time, it was the back end of the recession, so 2012, and people weren't hiring. And it was just like this constant sort of cycle of, am I going to get a job? Do I have to do something different? At that point, I was trying to, speak with careers people for advice, and they were saying, well, maybe you should lower your expectations. Maybe you should do something different. Like maybe doing this thing is so niche and so unique that it's never going to happen. And I just carried on. So tenacity got me through, bravery got me through,
Yeah.
and eventually I got a job in an agency. And then I moved to another agency, and then I moved to another agency, and then I made my own. So it was a journey, but I got there in the end.
Took the scenic route.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like really interesting that like you had that kind of feedback of like lower your expectations. I feel like so many people in that position would just like have this permanent chip on their shoulder, or it would just totally crush them and all their dreams. And they would just believe that person and, okay, I'm going to move on and try something else and potentially lose out on a really fulfilling career. I know that like I experienced that in athletics and it just like it crushed my soul. I'm like, I feel very like I didn't experience that much professionally, but I also experienced the like agency hopping thing and having people I was peers with being like, you don't want it bad enough, you know, like you'll never be art director. And I was like, I kind of put it like a chip on my shoulder, like I'll prove you, but not everyone has that kind of resiliency. Like where did you find you had to like dig deep to push on?
Many times. I mean, earlier on in sort of looking for a job, I went to London, didn't get paid very much. I was basically living off my own savings. The salary that they gave me in London did not cover like anything really. It was literally not even worth getting out of bed for.
So relatable.
It was so meager, but I was doing it for the experience. And there were multiple times when I thought, I don't know if I can do this anymore, because there's a lots of like, you need to do better, you need to work harder, your portfolio is not good enough, you need to practice more, you need to be more commercial, you need more projects in your portfolio, otherwise you're not going to succeed. So I had multiple times, especially at the beginning, where I thought, can I do this? And then once I got into the rhythm of actually getting jobs in agencies, you realize that actually you have a lot to learn and a lot to work on to get your portfolio to standard. And I think that's a big thing, is I think we expect ourselves to be perfect from the get-go, and actually every project and every experience is about learning and growing, and every project leads you to the next project where you can improve. I left uni thinking that I could do everything. I realized that I needed to get my head down and work and learn from some really great people. I'm a big believer of the agency route, because I learned a lot and my skills were developed. I worked with some really talented people, really intelligent people, saw lots of brands walk through the room, so I'm very kind of like, I feel privileged to have had that experience. But there were times, even in the biggest agency that I worked in, there were times when I thought, oh, it's hard going, like keeping that level of like that constant level of design and achievement, perfection. Like you've got to hit it every single day, and if you don't, then we'll go to the next designer, the one who sat next to you. Let's compete with one another, sort of thing. So it wasn't perfect, but I think that showed me how I could do it differently for myself, and it showed me what I would want, what I want to do with my business. And now I do it, so it's cool.
That's so cool. I relate to literally all of that. Like the person quite literally sitting next to me was always like competing with me for different projects, and it was so frustrating, because you like have personal relationships with your peers, but it's also like a very tenuous thing too. It creates a lot of resilience.
Yeah.
I would really love to know, like, can you tell me a little bit more about how you kind of, beyond your degree, decided that like you were really going to lean into packaging as like your main niche, and like where this point of view has kind of come from, that like it shouldn't be just like an a la carte service that designers should just like tack on as cheap as possible. Like tell me a little bit about your philosophy there, because I think that's really interesting coming from like a web focused thing where we very much do that, and I know that it's bad.
Well, no, it's just different, isn't it? Like we do web as well, but I know that our focus will be it's definitely the product first. But yeah, so for me, it's not unusual for me to specialize in packaging, because I have that agency background where every place I've worked has been a packaging agency. So I knew coming out of uni that I wanted to go into the packaging agencies, and especially in the UK, we've got London, Manchester, Leeds, where they have pockets of packaging agencies. So it's definitely like an industry within itself here. So I always saw myself being in part of that world. So for me, I'm just kind of following what I already know. But beyond that, for me, it's definitely about how, especially when you work with product-based businesses, for me, the product is the center of the universe for that brand. The product is the thing that's going to drive the sales time and time again, whether that's on shelf or on e-commerce. If the product doesn't stack up, the brand doesn't exist and won't succeed. So our job, or my job as the packaging designer or the studio that's working on the packaging, is to really make that product sing so that it can sell time and time again. That is the sales machine. from the way that I see it, which might be a little bit different to most, is that the website is the machine that kind of like supports that transaction and supports that kind of like activity. But at the core of it is the product that is the hero. And I see that as like, yeah, that's the lens through which I approach a packaging project for sure.
100%. Like even from like the photography, like it really is like center stage and shouldn't be like secondary. Do you notice a lot of like similar struggles now that you have your own studio that does packaging? Are the struggles with like clients, the pipeline, the feedback, are they similar or different to like the agency environment that you're in now that you're doing it yourself?
I guess that's difficult to answer because I was always a designer on the ground, on the shop floor, as it were. So I didn't always necessarily see the inner workings of the stuff, I guess. I mean, what I can speak to is feedback from clients, maybe being contradictory or maybe being challenging, or kind of always like you always have that feedback where you're like, we don't agree with that, but we're going to show it anyway. And then we're going to show you what we think is better. So there's elements of that, and that we still do that now, where there are requests that you don't quite align with, but you sometimes have to think, well, actually, shall we try it? Like, do we have to leave our ego at the door, try it out? And sometimes it works out better than we could have imagined, or sometimes we're absolutely right and we have to then show a better option. I think that's standard with any situation, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do the same, right?
Oh, 100% the same. It's really interesting too, because like there's a lot of talk in like the branding world of like the one concept method, but I'm curious as to like, I've obviously been through your process in the packaging design course, which like highly recommend. And like your chats on like semiotics was like really like, it's like the most basic thing, but like articulated in such a way where it's like, finally, I can understand how to execute on this concept. You know what I mean? So I'm curious as like, this is just off the cuff question, but like, do you do like a one concept method sort of kind of thing? Do you present a lot of concepts, a lot of different directions? Like, how do you kind of go about that process that's different from the brand and web design kind of process?
Sure. So we definitely do the brand and the packaging as one concept together. Like we don't do logo, then this, then packaging, then fonts. Like it's not disparate. It's definitely one piece of experience for the client. So they see it in action for the first time on the project itself. And that's because I don't believe that the two should be separate ever. I think that the two go hand in hand. In terms of the number of concepts that we present, it can vary. So I have done the one concept approach and that's worked really well, but I also sometimes really lean on multiple concepts, never more than 3. What I tend to do is 2. And sometimes I'll have a push concept, which is my wild card, which is the one that is the most challenging for the client. And what I often will do then is have a safe option, a middle option, and a push, so that I can see how far we can dial up or dial down different things. The thing is with the one concept approach, which I do believe in fundamentally from a streamlining point of view and from a like, yeah, it's great in the sense that we're the experts and we need to present the idea that we think is going to win. However, there's often nuance, and especially with our projects, we can, and I always say dial up and dial down. That's the language that I've learned in agency. There are sometimes different stories and different things that we can really dial up or like elevate on one concept and tell a different story. And we might want to balance that on the next concept and tell a slightly different story and dial something down. And it's not always as straightforward as saying, hey, this is the perfect solution, because I think there's room for exploration. And that in turn creates a dialogue and a narrative with the client, which then means you can make more informed decisions in a collaboration versus just kind of like you sitting at the screen making those decisions for them. Yeah. I know that's like an unusual, maybe a different way of approaching it, but for me, it's all about that dialogue and that communication aspect with the client to get to the best solution. And sometimes it starts with taking a step back, looking at what you have, then going on in and having that conversation, and the clarity comes from doing the action.
Totally. I feel, I resonate with all that. We call them territories, like which territory do you want to play into, like, so I love that dial up, dial down language. That's awesome. Do you ever find that like clients tend to Frankenstein concepts in any way, and how, like, what kind of tactics do you take in terms of guiding the feedback process to avoid the Frankensteining?
Naturally that happens for sure. I mean, 9 times out of 10 that there's a conversation where you can tell it's going to go that way, but I'm very, very clear when I present the work for the first time. Do not Frankenstein. I will say that, like, this is not the intention. This shouldn't be like that. There's a reason for it. And I think the way that I communicate with my clients is quite firm. And I feel like there's an understanding that, trust me,
Yeah.
Okay if we don't do that. I'm open to the conversation, so I'll say, if you want to explain what your thoughts are, I can tell you if I agree or not. And sometimes it's something like, I really like the color from this concept, can we bring it in? Like, sure, that's not as much of an issue as like taking the logo and then putting this on here and like adding all these bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So again, it's nuanced and it's a dialogue, and I'm happy to have the conversation as long as it's just a clear conversation, straightforward situation for me. It's not, I don't get too worried about things like that, because we're all human and we're going to ask the questions, aren't we? So
100%. I don't know if this was your experience, but like being in an agency, I think that's been like the biggest shift, is like having that direct contact and that built-in trust, because you're not just a junior or a senior designer with like 7 people above you. You actually have that space to have those conversations with your client. Yeah.
That's what I enjoy, actually. And that's what I realized when I left the agency world, is that sitting at a desk designing all day is not where that's not where my magic is.
Yeah.
My magic is leading a client through the process. I enjoy designing, but actually for me, it's that one-to-one, taking them through, showing them everything, explaining everything, and really making them feel comfortable about the decisions that I'm making with them. That's where I feel like I'm in my element. So for me, sitting at a desk all day is not how I do what I do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Okay. I love this. Good segue, because you have been like globetrotting, which is so cool. Like goals, girl.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to know, because I think like traveling while running a business, and you've like made all these steps to incorporate, like things are happening, you have a course, like that's no small potatoes thing to do and juggle. So you've like designed your company to be able to like go on like extended vacations and like to places you wouldn't have been able to had you been stuck behind the desk at 9 to 5. So I'm really curious, like what have you kind of implemented in terms of your client process or your financial planning or whatever that looks like to enable you to kind of do those kind of experiences?
I think initially I didn't have any kind of like, there was nothing implemented. So in 2018, I left my first role. Then in 2019, I was in Barcelona for 4 weeks. Then I was in Bali for 5 weeks. At the time, that was like great. Like, and then obviously the pandemic happened. But at the time, I just worked when I traveled. So I took my laptop and I just worked. And what I'd managed to do was make it so that I could keep, I mean, I was doing everything at that point. So I could keep on top of everything by just getting up early in the morning, smashing out a few hours of work, then I would go and explore, then I'd come back and maybe do some more in the evening. So it wasn't a holiday, but it was definitely giving me the opportunity to be out and about, which is what I love. And then more so recently, I've found that one of the biggest things is the mental shift, in that it's okay for me to not be in the UK doing my work. For a while, it felt quite challenging to have clients know that I was traveling, or do they think I'm on holiday? And I think just releasing that limiting belief has kind of like really set me free, if you will. And I also have clients that are very similar in that they don't have standard jobs. They're free spirits. They don't expect me to be at my desk 9 to 5. They're quite happy with an email landing on a Saturday. I know, shocking, we shouldn't email on a Saturday, but sometimes I do. And there's no judgment there. And I think having that, again, that transparent, like, this is the way that I live my life. It's a lifestyle business. They know that, I know that, everyone's happy with it, and the expectation is set. But I think that expectation has to come from me. So if I release the expectation to be at my desk 9 to 5, then in turn, everybody else understands it. And I think just having that communication is really cool. In terms of like the financial side, I haven't kind of planned for it, but certainly having a course helps, because you know that the revenue is there. The other thing is making sure that I charge sufficiently for a project means that I'm covered. So what I also do is make sure they're on a payment plan. So each month I'm acquiring revenue on a rolling basis without having the gaps in the revenue. Whereas initially when I first started, I would do like milestone payments, meaning some months I might not make any money.
Yeah.
The next month I make loads of money. And that means when you're on holiday, you've got this, like, you've not made anything. It's like, oh no. So now I know I can go away, and I'm not always the one doing the work. I might have a copywriter working on something. I have a web developer working on something else. I have my designer set to task on something. I might need to just check in every now and then, but stuff can keep going, and I know the revenue's coming through. So there's a series of things there, but it is lessons in letting go, but also lessons in delegating and charging appropriately, all of it.
Yeah, totally. I love that's like the approach of like, yeah, I'm traveling, the work will still get done. If you're not meek about it, like you have that air of confidence, you're like clients are not going to question you about it.
I
You know
don't
what I
even
mean?
like mention it anymore. Like I'm going to Mallorca next week.
No
Um,
way.
and nobody needs to know. Like
Yeah,
it's fine. They will
very
find
cool.
out when they see pictures on Instagram, but that's like everything will carry on. So no
Yeah,
sweat. It's
yeah.
cool.
I've even like my email signature, I've replaced all of my like business hours. It's just flexible and fluid. Like I'll work
I
whenever.
saw that. I love that. I want to steal that. Can I
Yeah,
steal that?
100%. Because like
Bring
after
it
this is
flexible.
over,
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
after this is
Love it.
over, I'm gonna go and like decompress from my course launch and just go and do some yoga and enjoy my
Yeah.
afternoon, and then catch like Australian clients and like actually we have a client right now in Vietnam or Thailand. And so yeah, taking calls at like 8 p.m. means I can take, you know, a French lunch, I like to call it.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. I like that kind of lunch. I think the thing is with it's outdated to expect a certain standard of like 9 to 5 now, and the freedom is actually what everyone prefers.
Yeah.
So if you can find, again, I know that our kind of client is like-minded, and that really helps. So when they're on the same, like they live their lives the same way, they operate in the same way, everyone's just like in the same space, nobody
Yeah.
cares.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice. I like it.
Totally. And like how have you tried to carry that forward to the people that you employ? Because you just hired a studio manager, right? Studio assistant.
Yeah, assistant. Yeah. So I had
Yeah.
an assistant in the past. She left for a full-time role, so I've just hired another assistant called T. She starts in a couple of weeks. And again, we just have a very fluid way of working. So she'll check in when she needs to. I'm very much kind of like, you do what you need to do when you need to do it. I'll do what I need to do when I need to do it. And at some point, our paths will meet when they need to, if we need to. Otherwise, we'll just keep it fluid and flexible. That's the word of the day, fluid and flexible for sure. And for me, it's just making sure that everyone has their own, like, yeah, like I trust everyone to just do what they need to do when they need to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have to be like inside your brain at the same time. It just gets
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So there's an
Totally.
element of trust there for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely been like, because we now have a junior designer, a project manager, an account manager. And one of the things that I'm like, how do you balance like making sure that everyone has structure and like the guidance and tools and touch bases that they need to stay accountable, but also have that like freedom and flexibility when they're not quite senior and they don't have some of the core skills that you develop when you are in an agency environment and you do have to be at your desk, right? Like what would you say are some of the things that you would not go back and change about that experience, like to that created that work ethic and resiliency that you have now to be where you are now today?
Being from an agency, what would I not change? For sure. I mean, the way in which people talk to one another, the language that we use, like the communication style within an agency. Yes, we don't have that same kind of like in the office space now. We're not kind of sat in a boardroom, but I think just the way in which conversations are had about brand and business, you learn a lot, you take a lot on. And I think that is a massive thing that I would always take forward and will always learn from. And also, I guess the other thing is how to give feedback and how to really help others on their journey and how to work in a team, how to collaborate, how to take critique, how to give critique subtly, gently, with grace, with compassion. Although it often isn't always the way in agencies to be like, so like it can be very direct, can't it, in an agency, like that's no good, start again. It can be like that, but also it can be very good for learning as well. And I think there's an element of sometimes a direct approach really gets you to where you need to be. And it's doing it in a way that feels really, really, yeah, kind, I guess. So all of the things together, really.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm really curious, like you recently just incorporated. I did too.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a huge business milestone.
Yeah.
So do you have any plans like to grow even more in the future? Like what does it look like for our kind like a year, 2 years down the road right now?
Oh, wow. That's a question, isn't it? Because that's a
It's
question
full
that
on.
oh yeah, because it did take me a little bit of time. I mean, the incorporation thing was always it was coming sort of this time last year. I decided it was happening, but I was waiting for the next financial year to make it happen. Just to kind of like made sense logistically to do that. But at the time of being about to do it, I was definitely having a wobble on about like, oh my God, what if we don't earn enough, or what if we're not big enough, or what if it's pointless, blah blah blah. And my accountant was like, doesn't matter, just do it, carry on. So I just carried on, and now I've done it. I'm like, oh yeah, it wasn't really that kind of scary, but there was definitely like a pulling back moment.
Yeah.
And when you pull back, that's because you need to go forwards, but you pull back because you're scared. So there's a little bit of fear. I don't know why that fear is there, but it just feels like such a big thing, right? It just feels like this. I'm now a company. It's a company. Like, what does that mean? Like, oh my God. So now that's done, I feel like I've been, what was that, April? So cruising for a while. And in my mind, I'm thinking, right, what's the next step? And I know there's something on the horizon. I don't know what it is necessarily. I still want to retain as much freedom as I have. I still don't want to be feeling like I've got to do a million hours. Like I don't work Fridays, for example. So for me, it looks like how I can take on more projects, hire more staff, maybe still freelancers, but still retain the element of freedom and time that I currently have, which is always like, how is that going to work?
Yeah.
So I'm still figuring that one out. In 2 years, I often used to think that I would have an actual office, but right now, I don't know that that's what I want. I don't think I want a physical office. I like the freedom, like we mentioned, I like to feel remote. Maybe it would be about having an office, which I could then use every now and then. Like I do go into a workspace now, so maybe it would be a more physical aspect.
Yeah.
That becomes a little bit more fluid still, but I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah, I've been looking for office space here in Toronto. It's like $4,000 for a site like smaller than this, or just like a derelict space. So I just actually redid my whole office so my account manager can come in twice a week to my like home, like my condo.
Oh, wow.
Sit and work.
Nice.
Yeah, it's definitely like a like an expense that just burns your profitability so quickly.
Yeah. And that's the thing about what we do, the overheads can be low. So like I don't really need to do that. It all comes back to what success looks like, right? And for a long time, I thought success looked like having this really fancy office, filling it with people, having lots of staff. And I've learned that that's not necessarily the case. But then it's like, what is the next thing of growth? What does growth look like? Is it more people? Is it more projects? Is it charging more? I know for sure we need to rebrand, so that's for sure on the list of things to do. That's like, when does that get done? Who knows? And I have more ideas for more courses, like all of the things. To be honest.
All of the things. So how did you make that decision to hire like a studio assistant? Like what did you do to like audit who is the person I need to bring on first? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that was a challenge, wasn't it? I remember I was mentored by Sierra, if you know those guys.
I sure do.
Yeah, so and we were talking about like who the next hire is going to be, and I went through, is it a designer, is it like a project manager, is it an admin person? And I basically just reflected on like where my time is lost, or kind of like what all of the bits and pieces that I'm doing. So I just kind of captured all the tasks that I was working on and kind of wrote them all down. I realized that if the idea of handing off design was something that we're kind of encouraged to do, like in the hot potato thing where you hand off everything really quickly. But I realized that by doing that, I wasn't as happy in my job. I like still being able to design. I don't design everything, but I like to have the choice. And I realized that I was making compromises on the design side in terms of timing and allocation because I had all of these other things to do. Whereas actually, if I freed up my time in that regard and by passing off admin and other stuff to somebody else, then that means I could be more happy in the creative side. So it's all like process. I'm like, who am I? What am I? What makes me happy? Why am I doing this? Where should my time be spent?
Yep.
And I realized that I was doing lots of little bits and pieces that I shouldn't be doing, really. And went about it like that.
I feel so many similarities. I remember like auditing my time last January before I hired my like assistant. I guess she would have been like my like studio assistant, and she's now grown into a project manager, and now she's going to be a studio manager. She's been with me for like 1.5 years. But I remember starting and being like, oh, like, no, like working for myself, I'm going to get to do all design, like minimum 80%. And then when I actually audited my time, it was like maybe 10-15%. And I just felt like so overwhelmed and sick to my stomach because you don't realize how much admin actually goes into managing a studio and projects. What like I know she hasn't started yet, but what does that process look like for you to like onboard her, and has that changed your mindset about like how you run your company or how you change your processes for someone else to do the work for you?
Sure. So the assistant I had before, I have to be honest and say there was no plan. I just hired her and we just rolled with it. And
Wing
whenever
it.
she needed to ask, because I thought, do you know what? I've never done this before. And one of the things that there was a big barrier for me, I went through a lot of like, oh, I can't do it yet. Again, you notice looking back when you're like on the cusp of doing something, but you step back because you're scared. I was like, oh, I can't do it because I haven't got standard operating procedures written down. I haven't got lists of what she needs to do written down. I haven't got all of these things documented and recorded like we're supposed to have because that's what we're told to do. And then I thought, you know what, it's the whole action creates clarity narrative, isn't it? So just get on with it, do it. You'll get the SOPs at the time, you'll get the documents at the time, and everything will work out as it should do at the right time. So not always necessarily to plan in advance. So we just rolled with it and figured it out as we went along, and she learned the tasks and we did the things and it all worked out. So now moving forward with the second assistant, I have that. Again, I'm not too worried. I know that she might want to do things differently, but I've already been through the process once. Mm-hmm. I already know what kind of things we need to do. I will give her the videos that we've recorded. I'll give her the steps that we already have in place. We have all the list of things that we need to do, but I'm also confident that she will take what we have and then do things in her own way, which I'm more than happy about and would encourage as well. So yeah, it's always a big lesson, isn't it?
Huge. It's always like, we're not saving babies here too. Like the worst thing you can do is send an email that has the wrong information on it, you know? That perspective too.
We're not saving lives. That's what I always come back to when times are difficult or when something's like you miss a deadline or timelines, everyone gets very precious about timelines. And I used to be very like, oh, we've got to fit it in, squeeze it in to this allocation. But you know what? I'm not saving lives. And as long as my piece is intact, as long as my client's piece is intact, as long as everybody's happy, healthy, and well, and we're having fun, I don't care about the timeline, which is possibly not the most business sense. But I'm not like, I don't know, business is going well, so why change it? I'm all right with it.
Yeah, if it's not broken, why fix it?
It's working for me. So
yeah. That's very cool. It sounds like there's just so many good things happening for you right now, like so much positivity. I'm really curious, like what has been the hardest part that you could not have expected in the last, 2 years since you started Our Kind in 2020 officially, right?
Yeah, 2020 was when Our Kind was born. Prior to that, I was kind of just cruising on my own with my own name, freelancing a little bit. It's the most difficult thing the obvious answer is the pandemic, right? So things got a little bit weird, didn't they? Definitely acquiring projects at the right price point. I mean, that was always bound to happen as a new agency, as a new business in 2020 during a pandemic. Like there's a couple of things going on there where it's not always going to be easy. You can't go straight in with a 20K project because what's going on here? The context means a lot. So during the pandemic, I really got to work on money mindset stuff, really got to work on pushing the edges of what I could receive in terms of capacity for accepting money and being all right with earning money. And because it was kind of like, I went through a lot of conversations with lots of potential clients during the pandemic, but I really challenged myself to go higher each time. And I knew that I was going to lose the projects because, or like not new, but I was
at peace with it.
Yeah, I wanted to push myself and see what I could do, which was a privileged place to be in, but it was almost like, well, now's the time to do it. So yeah, really kind of like practice that. I think if I hadn't pushed myself to that point, I would still have been charging under value. And it had to happen. So
I remember looking back at projects I booked like very early on and being like, I paid myself 2 cents an hour, quite literally, after all it's said and done. I feel like a lot of women in the space, if you are open to getting into this conversation, I tend to get here often, but a lot of women in this space, like even when they come out of agencies and they have been in that situation like you and I were in, where you're like woefully underpaid. I remember when I was living in Vancouver at the agency, first like studio agency I worked at, I was in the red $100 a month. And I just remember trying to take on freelance projects, even less than what I was being paid per hour at this place, just to make ends meet. But I think there's something to be said about like being in that situation. It's almost doesn't give you that permission slip to charge what you actually should be compensated to like make an appropriate living. And so something that's been top of mind for me as I hire people is like, how how can I embody, white male energy and charge,
Yeah,
demand the
yeah,
prices that I want so that I don't,
absolutely.
right? So that I don't have to, pay only minimum wage for my designer who deserves more of, quality of life. It's a
Mhm.
really hard balance to strike though with the whole people pleasing thing. So what was like the biggest, I know this is off the cuff, but like, did you have a big mindset shift to give yourself that permission slip to start charging higher prices?
It's hard, isn't it, that I don't think it was don't think there's one moment. I think it was a series of moments and a series of realizations that I'm worth it. A series of realizations where I am actually very good at what I do, and I deserve to do well. I deserve, like, money's not a bad thing. And the more money that I make, the more gifts I can give to the world, the more people I can help. It just, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a thing. Even now, I look at the quotes that we're sending out and think, oh, I could push that harder.
Yeah.
And I could go another, I want to, but there's, again, you're always at the edge. You're always at the edges of what you feel your capacity is. And it just takes the next time to push that edge a little bit further. So I know now I'm about to book 2 more projects. I think after that, we're going to go higher.
Yeah.
Because why not? But I don't know what the permission slip is, other than just really looking at yourself and thinking, what is it that's stopping me?
Yeah.
Why is that? And I remember sitting in an agency, one of the agencies that I worked in, and there were white men like walking around, like talking business and brand. And I sat there thinking, oh, look how great it is to be able to talk about money like this and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I was like, oh, I'll never be able to do that because of who I am. I'm a woman, where I'm from, blah, blah, blah. I don't have that upbringing like they have. Like, I just thought it's never going to be me. But then I think it takes a lot of work to undo those stories that you tell about yourself. And it's not an overnight thing.
Not.
And I'm still undoing those stories now, and still looking at myself and thinking, do you know what, you can do this. And if you can do it for yourself, you're showing lots of other people that it's possible as well. And that's actually what drives me to keep pushing forwards, with, especially with money. Like, I love making money, and if I can do it, I want to show other people that they can do it too.
I love that. I think that's why I loved your packaging design course, because you are so generous with your knowledge and like every technical detail I could ever possibly imagine. Like just even the one lesson of like design in RGB, I was like, duh. You know what I mean? So I really have to like thank you for just being so generous. Like you don't hold anything back in your course. That's always something I look for, is like, are you just gatekeeping information to make a buck? And I don't feel that way at all. So
No, the intention is pure. I just want women to just make the money. And I honestly think that packaging is a great way of like the projects are just so valuable.
yeah.
And they do so much for our clients. And even a 20 grand, 25 grand, 30 grand project is just scratching the surface of the revenue outcome for that client.
Yeah.
They're going to make so much more than that with the right kind of client, of course. Like, there's all relative. Which is another topic in itself, like making sure you're talking to the right people in order to charge that kind of fee. But yeah, even now, like, it's just making sure that you're aware of the end game for that person, and knowing that you play a massive part in their business, and
100%.
owning that, and really kind of like respecting that for yourself as well.
That's so, yeah, 100% here for this whole conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that. Would you be open to sharing with everyone a little bit more about the packaging design course and where people can find you as well?
Sure, yeah. So the packaging design course is everything to do with packaging that I have learned over, what's it going to be now? Maybe like 11 years. So the things that I do now versus the things that I've learned historically, that I've combined into a process. And of course, processes are always changing and learning. So changing and growing. So I have a lesson next week where I'm going to update my students on a new thing that I do in my process. So the course is a standard process, and then I add on different things as I'm growing as well. So it walks you through all the way from talking to a client at the beginning of a project, how to understand if they're a right fit for you, stuff that for me comes very naturally now, like I can sense check a client's availability and readiness to proceed in a few seconds. But if you're not familiar with the process and you don't know what questions to ask, it gets more difficult. So I'll break down all of those things. The worst thing with the packaging project is taking on a client who isn't quite ready or doesn't have the stuff that they need, because it can cause chaos down the line. So all of that's really important. And we go all the way through Yeah, the steps, the process, design things like semiotics, things like how to work with a shelf, and then all the way through to production and print, setting up the packaging for art with artwork and all the color stuff and everything really, which again is everything that I know. Like I live and breathe this stuff, so it's what we do every single day.
Yeah, it's been so helpful. Like just like the 2 print projects we've had this summer, just like the color chip, like that like printer readme file like template that you have is like helped us avoid so many production problems.
Whole thing. And I think one of the questions that I'm always asked is like, how does even clients ask it as well, like, how does the printer know what to do? I'm like, well, first thing, the printer knows what to do because that's their job. They print day in, day out. They're in their lane. They've got their shit together. Hopefully they know what they're doing. We're in our lane, and our lane involves looks like making sure the files are exquisitely prepared, very detailed, very accurate, and you look after your side of the street. If you do that, the printer can look after their side of the street. Everything's good. We don't need to worry about like how it all works. And then the template is one of the small things that we can do to just aid that communication, making sure that they've got everything that they need. I never get a question from a printer. They don't need to ask questions because it's all within the document. The document is their roadmap for what they need to do. But if you don't have that insight, I can imagine the questions are like, oh my God, how do they know what to do? But we set it up in a way that makes it very clear for them.
Yeah, and having like the mock-up at the bottom, totally. Yeah, such game changer. That's amazing. I guess for everyone who's here, if you wanted to ask a question, now would be a great time to do that. I'll just check in on the chat as well. Oh, Charlene says, literally in this place right now, love that you're just able to go for it instead of holding back. I'm assuming we're talking about like pricing there because that was just a few minutes ago, but that's awesome.
It's about hiring at the time, about like, when I was talking about not having processes and then holding back and then thinking, you know what, we'll figure that out as we go.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses just, we don't always know the answers. We just have to go. We'll find the answer at the right time.
Totally. Messy action is better than inaction, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Well, doesn't look like we have any questions, but where can people find you, and when are you releasing the packaging design course again for enrollment estimated?
Sure. Yeah, so it's actually currently evergreen, so that's nice. I haven't taken it down. I was going to take it away, but I haven't. It's currently live, so that's cool. And where you can find me is on Instagram, lauraevans.co, if you want to talk to me. And then we also have the Our Kind Studio account as well, which is less, I must say, less looked after because I do the work on mine, but it's there as like a backup, as a support system. So yeah, DMs welcome, emails are welcome as well.
Amazing. And we're actually talking, I think in January, I have it booked for the lesson on growing team and what that looks like for your studio. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We'll see how that goes. In terms of the launch sequence, we might put it on waitlist for a little bit just to build some momentum in anticipation of your session, and then we can go for a nice big January launch, new year, new projects, all of that stuff. So yeah, super exciting.
So exciting. Okay, well, thank you so much, Laura, for your time. I just feel like there's so much synergy and like a lot of like similarities here. So I feel really grateful to know you and have that time.
I would appreciate you having me. Yeah, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here. So super cool.
Awesome. And actually, speaking of Xanthi and Frank O'Sierra, they're actually going to be my next guest next week. So we're going to do it in actually a podcast format, which I'm really excited. I'm going to be transitioning Co.Create to a podcast and then posting the replay on YouTube. So if you are not following me, I'll post about that on LinkedIn and Instagram and via email. But thank you everyone so much for joining, and I can't wait to talk to you in a few weeks from now. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye. Take care. Bye.